So, Misty, what do you make of the decision to deny Diddy bail not once, but twice? Also, not change his location to another jail. We know the Metropolitan Detention Center is known to be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. The Metropolitan Detention Center is notorious, and there's a lot of criticism about civil rights issues and about the fact that there's not a lot of not enough security, and there has been violence. So the defense has actually asked that he be transferred to Essex County, that's in New Jersey. And the other alternative would be Otisville. That's in upstate New York. The judge actually doesn't make that determination. That goes before the Department of Corrections. So there is the prospect that he could be transferred to one of those two other facilities in the coming weeks or months before his trial. As for bail, there's an important legal aspect with respect to the type of charges that we're seeing here. And that's that the defense actually comes in with the disadvantage when we have charges of this level and severity. And that's because the judge has to look at it from the presumption of detention, meaning it's more likely that somebody will be detained when they face these charges than not. And then the judge was very moved on that aspect of obstructionist behavior, and also that he was willing to engage in violence, which the Cassie video was actually used to further that point on behalf of the prosecution. So I'm not surprised that he was denied bail. His lawyers did everything they can, presented a package, keeping track of every single individual he would come into contact with. But the nature of the charges would make that very, very difficult, especially with someone so high profile like Diddy.
And Caitlyn, Diddy's lawyer says, look, he's doing fine. Suicidal watch is procedural. But why is it necessary?
You know, as Misty mentioned, it's a really nasty place to be incarcerated. So that just out of the gates is something you want to keep an eye on. Of course, we've had one of the most high-profile suicides in incarceration at that very same detention center was Jeffrey Epstein. So that's something they're looking at as well. And as they said, it is procedural, but you have to think about it. You have someone like Diddy who's the way he lives is most certainly not going to be the case when he's behind bars. So with such a drastic change in how he's living the high life versus now he's living life behind bars, you just want to keep an eye on. I mean, it's going to do a number on someone's mental health, no matter who they are, whether or not they're guilty or innocent. And of course, in this case, he has pleaded not guilty. But when you're behind bars there, it's a scary place to be. And so if you're looking for a way out, they're just making sure that that is not going to happen.
And Misty, with the case prosecutors are building against him, in your opinion, what would Diddy's best strategy be?
Look, he's going to have to attack the nature of the charges. To Caitlyn's point, we're going to see a lot of pretrial motions. They're going to be saying, okay, these federal sex trafficking charges, these are not appropriate under the circumstances. They may have to concede other conduct that are bad acts or even criminal, but that they don't fall under this very, very serious set of federal statutes. And with respect to the racketeering charges, I would expect to see the defense to argue as this case proceeds that you had a lot of independent bad actors, not necessarily individuals who are working in furtherance of the quote unquote Combs enterprise. So those are the two areas that defense attorneys are going to attack. And by the way, Caitlyn brought up a great point about timeline of trial. So a defendant has the right to a speedy trial. That means 70 days from indictment to trial. But the question is, can the defense actually prepare the way they need to prepare? 50 witnesses interviewed, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of audio, video recordings, electronic devices received. So a lot of defendants do waive that. That's something to keep in mind as we come into this week's procedural hearing. Will he waive speedy trial, or will we be on that rocket docket for a trial in the coming months? But we can expect to see these pretrial motions and a lot of arguments relating to the individuals involved, which has also been foreshadowed by the defense attorney interviews. And so that's where the defense is really going to attack the legal theories of the case.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.